Hi everybody, this is Val Rainbow and Mandala Arts. I mentioned previously on one of my videos that I was going to show you how to make t-shirt yarn. So this is a short introduction to show you how this is done. So I have my t-shirt here, which is a smallish teenager's t-shirt, and I have my ironing board. Now you might not be able to see it, but on the this side, which is my left hand side, I have the pointy end of the ironing board. So what I'm going to do is open up the t-shirt, slide it onto the ironing board, and just because I quite like to know where I've started, I'm going to start where there's a seam, and then I'm going to cut round. Just to mention that it's absolutely fine to use t-shirts that have got seams in them, but you might find that depending on how old the t-shirts are, the seams are going to be a weak spot. So you might find that when you come to make your yarn up, you will get breaks where the seams are. But in the next video, I'm also going to show you a way to join them. This is really good. Anyway, let's get on with cutting them. So we're going to start by just taking off the hem of the t-shirt. So I'm just going to start by cutting into the t-shirt. Now it might feel a little bit scary, but once you start it, you'll be fine. So the reason I've got it on the ironing board is because I can just slide it, and that's really easy. No risk of cutting yourself or your clothes. Believe me, that's happened before, and really makes it convenient. If you can't stand up, you can also sit down to do this. Just lower your ironing board down a little. So I'm just cutting off that hem. Now, it might be possible to use this. I haven't found a use for the hem part, so I am going to throw it away. But if you can find a use for it, fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to get started on cutting our yarn. As I may have mentioned before, you can get different sorts of t-shirt yarn ready-made, and generally speaking they tend to be quite thick. Well, I say, yeah, they're quite thick. So that if you're trying to make your t-shirt yarn to match that or to use alongside it, you will need to cut your strips of yarn, and we'll talk about that in a second, a little bit wider. I prefer to have mine about maybe an inch thereabouts, but if you're buying t-shirt yarn that's already made, you'll find it's quite a bit wider, more like 1.5 inches. You can have it even thinner if you want, but you will find it will break if it gets too thin. So I tend to go for roughly about 1 inch. Now I cut it freehand because it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of variation between the widths, as long as it's not a huge difference. If you're one of these people who likes to measure things, which is absolutely fine, there are two ways you can do that. You can either put pins in and use a tape measure, or another idea, which is a bit quicker, is to cut yourself a strip of cardboard the width of what you want, and then you place it on the fabric and cut alongside it. So it's like using a ruler. So it's entirely up to you. I'm sure you'll find ways of doing it that work for you. So up the seam, I'm just going to cut at a slight angle into the t-shirt. Then I'm going to straighten up my scissors and start cutting. So you may be able to see I've cut a strip that's approximately about the width of the end of my little finger, about 1 inch or so. And I'm going to try and keep it to that as I go round. As you'll see, I've got really good dressmaking scissors. That's really important too. Right, so as before, I'm just going to roll or slide my t-shirt round, and just keep cutting. So you cut through the seams and just keep going. So as you can see, I'm doing it mostly by eye. And there may be places where it gets a little wider. That doesn't matter too much, as I said before, but not too much variation. Now, I'm just coming up to where I started. So to keep my strip even, I'm going to have to again veer in slightly to continue. Now that, as you might be able to see, leaves a bit of a bump. I usually just trim that off slightly to make it look even and fit in with the rest of it. You can see that it's not too noticeable. So I'm going to carry on cutting and cutting and cutting until I get up to the armpit seam, and then I'm going to record again and show you what you do next. Okay, so bear with me, and when you've cut all the way around, we'll rejoin.